Hello, everybody, and welcome into the 51st edition of Texas Longhorns Live. We really appreciate you guys being here. Again, guys, we're here every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so we really appreciate you guys being here for that. And let's jump right into this. So, we want to discuss today whether Steve Sarkisian is the best recruiter slash developer that Texas has had, honestly, in the history of its program. Interpret that whatever way you want. I will say I only went back to Mac Brown because they started the seventh round draft era around that time. It's kind of hard to tell the difference when someone has 20 rounds to choose players, whereas seven. So that's a big difference. So I'll let you start first, Gerald. Do you believe he is the best we have had?
It's such a tough moment because you don't want to like fall into the recency bias thing, right? Where you don't want to fall into the, Texas just had its most successful draft class in the 7 round era, and Sark has had more in the last two drafts than they had in the 10 years prior, right? So like there's a lot of evidence that's mounting up recently that shows that Texas is doing a really good job of recruiting and developing players, right? I think the cat like the tension I have to manage here when you talk about it is like, Mac Brown had a lot of players drafted and recruited. I don't think they never had 12. I don't think. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Right, that's the record. And I think part of the Mac Brown era at Texas was a lot of the guys that he had drafted were those guys that are the can't miss kind of guys, where they came to campus already really good, got better. Like I'm not saying Vince Young didn't get better while at Texas, right? Or Michael Huff or Aaron Ross, those kind of guys. They came to Texas and got better, but I think on a position by position basis, kind of across the board, as somebody who's been following Texas football now for 26 years, right, more than a quarter of a century, I've not seen the breadth of development, right? Where Texas was DBU for a long time. It had a lot of guys drafted and the defensive back unit. Texas had a lot of defensive tackles drafted, but the skill players were hit or miss. And now Texas has had a routine level of these of consistency across the board. We're seeing a smattering of offensive linemen, defensive linemen, skill guys. Quarterback is notwithstanding, right? Quarterback probably still something out there, but I think from a breadth of recruiting, we haven't seen this in modernity. I don't think.
No, I would agree with that. So I actually have this charted. So Mac Brown at 16 years at Texas had 64 draft picks total, including 16 first round picks. So that's a lot. And then Charlie Strong had obviously not great here. He had 6 draft picks in 3 years, so about 2 a year. He did have 1 first round pick. And then Tom Herman actually surprised me because, like, on average, he's getting 4 guys drafted basically. He had 15 draft picks in 4 years, but he had 0 first round picks. And I think that was our biggest thing with Tom Herman. When we got the 5-star guy, he didn't end up being a first round pick. If we got the 4-star guy, he didn't end up being a first round pick. Basically, he took you from high school and he really didn't get much better because, listen, let's face it, guys, these guys straight out of high school, if you just sit them down and have them go to practice on their own for 3 years and they were a 5-star recruit, they probably would have ended up getting drafted anyway. So that's kind of the issue with Tom Herman. And then Steve Sarkisian, 6 first round draft picks and 28 draft picks overall. So yeah, he's doing something that really nobody has done. Like, if he continues this pace, Steve Sarkisian will have just as many first-round draft picks probably in 3 years as Mac Brown did in 16 years. If he continues this pace, he's going to have as many guys drafted. He's at 28. Mac Brown was at 64 in 16 years. At probably 7 to 8 years, he's probably going to be at that 64 number. So he's doing something Texas has not seen ever. Like, I think he is the best developer slash recruiter. I will say this. Obviously, NIL does help that. It does. Yeah. You can't just say, hey, listen, he's the best. But I do think even without NIL, he would have ended up one of the 3 best, because wherever he was at, that's what people talk about. He's a really good developer. He's really good at building connections. You heard that at Alabama. Bryce Young is someone that got recruited by Steve Sarkisian. He said that at Southern Cal, he was really good at that as well. They had good recruiting classes in this before NIL. So he still would have been really good in my opinion, but NIL has definitely enhanced Steve Sarkisian as well.
Yeah, and I think, I've said this before on our live streams, is that like the guys that Texas was recruiting, they're going to get paid wherever. And so I think the differentiator that Sark has seen in this era is honestly like focusing more on the development. He's got coaches that are known as teachers, coaches that have NFL pedigrees. They just brought in Dwayne Aquina, who's one of the best teachers of technique in the secondary that we've seen in probably 30 or 40 years in college football, right? So like Steve Sarkisian, I think, is prioritizing developing these players because he knows that if they go to Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, wherever, they're going to get paid, right? These 5-star guys are going to get their bag wherever they go. So Steve Sarkisian's pitch to them is you can get paid at Texas, and we've got the guys that are going to get you NFL paid, right? You can get college paid. We're going to get you NFL paid, right? We're going to get you there in the league, and you're going to get to a second contract. You're going to be a guy who they prioritize as wherever you are in the draft, right? So I think that, to me, is the differentiator for Texas right now, is that, Steve Sarkisian has prioritized building a staff of teachers, building a staff of guys who are going to and have pedigrees of getting guys in the league, right? Kyle Flood gets guys in the league. Dwayne Aquina gets guys in the league. Sark himself gets guys in the league. The other coaches have Chris Jackson, NFL guy, right? Defensive line coach, NFL guy, right? So you're seeing there's a pattern of we're going to get you to the league because you're going to get paid wherever. You're going to get paid wherever you go. So we're going to prioritize bringing on coaches that are going to teach you skills. They're going to teach you how to be a professional, and they're going to get you to the league because that's really where these guys are going to go because they're going to get their bag wherever.
No, that's very true. And I hear people, and I've seen, there was actually an article written when doing my research. I forget who wrote it, but they basically said, how much credit do we have to give Tom Herman? Because 12, I believe, of the 28 draft picks are from Tom Herman to Steve Sarkisian. I would say very little because of what my point was early on Tom Herman. He didn't develop. So why can I give him credit for people he brought in the program? Yeah, he brought him in, but let's be honest here. A lot of these guys probably weren't going to get drafted or drafted a lot lower if they were under Tom Herman than when they were under Steve Sarkisian. Guys like Moro Ojimo honestly wasn't really going to get drafted. He wasn't even on any draft radar. Got drafted in the 7th round. Yeah, it's a low draft pick, but he still got drafted compared to probably being undrafted under Tom Herman. Keandre Coburn, I think, is the best example of that. That's a guy no one really, he was honestly a disappointment under Tom Herman. Then Sark came in, and I believe he ended up being a 5th round pick, and he's still playing in the NFL cashing checks. So guys like that, you have to give a lot of credit to. And another point on that, there are guys that got drafted under Tom Herman that have played great in the NFL. When they got away from Texas, they played much better. I as a Broncos fan, have experienced this personally. I saw Kane Stearns when we drafted him. I was like, I don't really know. He came in, he was great right away. And we've continued to see his progress in the NFL. Guys like Brandon Jones, I know he's a Charlie Strong guy, but he also was under Tom Herman for a little bit, came in 3rd round pick, and he's played much better. Again, also on the Broncos. Poona Ford, I think, might be the best example of that. A guy, I believe, he either was 7th or undrafted, and he has been phenomenal, and he's going to have a long career in the NFL. So I think Sark, developing wise, I think he is the best. I think that is his calling card. Recruiter, it's hard to tell, like we said with the NIL, but overall, developing wise, I definitely think, even without NIL, I think he would have been the best.
Yeah, and I will say, I don't think you have to give Tom Herman a ton of credit, but one of the things that Tom Herman was able to do was able to stockpile skill talent, right? He was able to get a lot of skilled players on campus, and I have my own, frustrations with Herb Hand and how they handled the offensive line under Tom Herman. I could do a whole live stream about just that, right? But ultimately, like, some of those skill guys get here because of what Tom Herman was able to do. Some of the early skill guys in this class, right? Bijan Robinson, early skill guy for Steve Sarkisian, broke the Texas running back streak, right? Those are guys that Tom Herman got to campus. Now, Tom Herman has a reputation for being kind of a jerk, so folks didn't stay around long. Folks didn't want to be here. So there's a lot of other subtext that happens with the Tom Herman conversation. Tom Herman gets some credit for being a really great skill player recruiter, wasn't great at recruiting in the trenches. That's the first thing that Steve Sarkisian did and prioritized. And we've seen now year after year after year, these guys that Sark has prioritized, and even guys that came in under Herman that were not looking to be NFL draft guys, right? We just saw this year, Alfred Collins, right? We saw Vernon Broughton. Those guys were not projected to be NFL draft guys 2 years ago. Now look at both of them getting drafted. One of them getting drafted way earlier than we thought he would. So there's something to be said about what is happening at Texas right now versus what we saw. And it's not really a contest versus the Charlie Strong and Tom Herman eras. I think we can just skip over those.
Yeah.
And but even under Mac Brown, right, the breadth of guys, the guys that were all across the board getting drafted, we haven't seen it like this. I think in modernity for sure.
No, 100%. And I left this name out. Christian Jones. I think Christian Jones is literally case sample number one of guys. I said on here, because it was my first year doing this, after games, I said, this guy should never play offensive line for Texas. And he was,
Yep.
that's how bad he was. Like, I wasn't lying. Like, he was that bad. And then all of a sudden, this guy becomes like our best offensive lineman. And I'm like, oh, it's because we actually have coaches that know what the hell they're doing. So that was, I mean, that right there is what made me a Sark believer.
Yeah, I mean, he has done a great job from the initial staff, right? I remember when they fired Tom Herman and hired Steve Sarkisian. I said to my buddy jokingly, if he could only bring Kyle Flood with him, everything would be better. Everything would be better. And I thought, I didn't think it was going to happen. I figured Alabama would pay him any amount of money they possibly could to get him to stay, and Texas was able to lure him away. So, like, you cannot overstate. Like, and again, that first class, Bo Davis, great developer, great motivator, right? Like that first group of guys. And there were some misses, right? Texas has cycled a couple of times on the wide receivers coach. That's something that we have to, talk about. Blake Gideon had some issues, I think, both recruiting and developing. I think he's a young coach still trying to figure out, but obviously somebody likes what he's doing because he's moved on to bigger and better things. But the initial staff that Sark brought to campus did a lot of great work for them.
Will says Mark trash on Sark being hired. I did too. Like, when it came on, I didn't trash it. I said it was a C+ hire, but then with the coaching staff that came over with him, I said it moved to a B+ because his staff, he surrounded himself with very good football coaches. Like you said, Kyle Flood, Jeff Banks. That was like the last one, actually. They were fighting for like weeks, but Alabama and and Texas over Jeff Banks. Like, he probably got $200,000-300,000 extra dollars because they just kept going back and forth until he finally chose Texas. On top of that, they kept Stan Drayton, which is a really big keep at the time. Yeah. So that the staff is what made the difference for me. And I think Sark would tell you that too. I think the staff has helped him a lot, and he's retained the key pieces of that staff as well. Like, think about it. Pete Kwiatkowski, really big hire from Washington. We've been able to keep him. Kyle Flood, really big pickup from Alabama, been able to keep him. Jeff Banks from Alabama, been able to keep him. Those have been like the core guys that you've needed to keep. AJ Milwee, I'll throw in as well. So he's been able to retain the key guys as well. Now we've lost, like you said, a wide receiver coach here and there, running backs coach here and there, but the key guys he needs, he's kept.
Yeah, and Mark wasn't the only one trashing on the Sark hire. There were a lot of folks that were curious about. I had my reservations as well. He was an 8-win guy before his second year at Texas, right? That Sark had never hit the 10-win plateau. There were a lot of things, right? Was he really going to be able to sit in that chair with all of the things that happened in his past, right? The new all of those, like, Mark was not in a minority on not believing in Sark. I was cautiously optimistic because I'd seen what the offenses had done under Steve Sarkisian. I have a buddy who's both a Falcons fan and a Texas fan, and he was not a fan because of Sark in Atlanta. So, like, there people were all over the stinking board.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. That's the thing too. I didn't take as much into like the Washington and USC stints as other people did because he is an alcoholic, but he was dealing with like the peak of that during those times. So it's hard for me. There's nobody on the planet in that profession that can be a raging alcoholic and be successful. It's not possible. So for that to happen, I that's why I was kind of like, if that doesn't happen here, I think it'll be pretty good. That was my summary.
The Washington stint. Look at the year before he got there and the 2 years after. He did a pretty decent job, but we don't need to relitigate Steve Sarkisian's hire because I think it's worked out pretty well for Texas.
No, I agree, and we'll end it with that. Let's talk about this. So Texas offers 3 new guys in this year's class. They offered Aljur Miles, Landon Barnes, and Keith Doty. All 3 of them from Texas. Who do you like the most? And then I was kind of surprised. I'm going to be honest. I'll start out with this. Landon Barnes, I don't know why it took this long. Like, he's a 4-star top 150 guy in your backyard at Duncanville. So I don't understand why it took that long.
Yeah, and that one's a weird one. And I wonder if it was just like a getting him on campus and talking to him kind of thing, right? Like, I wonder if that's what it was. With him, I really like Landon Barnes. He has got this is going to sound weird. He's got the frame of like the Predator from the movie, like the Predator movies that I love to see in an edge rusher, right? Really long arms, lanky frame, right? He's playing it. He's playing at 235, at least what he's listed. He does not look like he's 235. He's got some muscle that he's going to put on that frame. He already uses his arms really, really well, extends the arms out, keeps the defenders off him, keeps that outside arm free. I think he's got, he has the advantage of being the most talented guy on the field for most of the days that he's there, especially, going against, some kid that is trying to pass Spanish 3 right on a random afternoon. So, but he's shown a lot of the ability that you want to see from a guy. I hate this term, but he's a high motor kind of guy where he's kind of always just going, going, going. I think he needs to work probably on his eye discipline a little bit. Kind of gets lost in the mess sometimes, but ultimately, like, he's one of those guys who's going to get into the Texas weight room and just absolutely freak out, just absolute monster of a frame. And that's not a shot at either of the other two guys, because I think Miles is also a really intriguing prospect. He's one that doesn't necessarily fit the mold that Steve Sarkisian normally has. He's a really big kid. But he's a super explosive athlete. He's a jumper in high school, so that's a massive athletic frame for him. I think the curious thing about him is his ability to run routes, because most of his tape is just like, I beat the guy at the line and then I run down the sideline and my quarterback chunks it up. So it's going to be curious. There's not a ton of tape on Doty. I don't know a lot about him. He's probably got a longer development cycle, but he's that typical, A gap, B gap defensive tackle that Texas likes and Texas needs. And, if there's a guy you think in state that can help you shore up that defensive tackle room, I'm tired of playing the portal game with that position. So get them all.
No, I agree. Yeah, I'm high on the Aljor and Landon Barnes. Landon Barnes is kind of like, to me, if Smith Orogbo had what he'll look like at the end of this year, body wise, is what I'm thinking. And he's already that. And they have a lot of similarities, like you said, very long arms, very unique athletically. And yeah, it's just weird to me how Duncanville's a hotbed, obviously, for recruiting all over the country, and it took this long to get this guy. So yeah, I don't know whether it's they just wanted to have a conversation with him, if they thought, hey, he's not really interested, he kind of wants to go away from home. I don't understand that personally, but yeah, that one's interesting to me. Top 150 guy. You should, like, to me, if he's in Texas and they're top 250, it should automatically, hey, you have an offer if you want it, type thing. Miles, I really like, and he had a really, really big year last year. 81 catches, 14 touchdowns, 17.7 yards per catch. So, like you said, big play threat. And yeah, he kind of dominates. Like, it's one move, get by the guy, go, it's a touchdown type thing. And that doesn't work at the college level, but he's got the frame, 6'2.5", 205. And Sark talked about, kind of changing up his portfolio at wide receiver of, I want one big guy now since we're in the SEC. I want that one physical guy. You kind of got that with the Khalil Lockett, bigger frame guy. Yeah. Go get the ball. But this guy's even taller. Like, he's 6'2.5". He'll probably end up being 6'3", 6'3.5" by the time he gets on campus. So an inch and a half taller than Khalil Lockett. He's 205. He is committed to SMU currently, and we've taken players from there before. But that's the thing too. Like, SMU does a pretty good job of recruiting guys. They kind of have to, because they're not one of the 3 to 4 biggest schools in Texas for football. So they kind of have to go after these guys and then develop them, and they do a pretty good job at developing them. So when they offer a kid like this, they're kind of like the neat new TCU to me with Gary Patterson, where when they offer a kid like one of these guys, my rabbit ears go up and think, hey, we probably need to look at this guy and give him a look more than we are at currently. And then Keith Doty, same thing. He's a guy, not even a top, I think, 400 guy right now.
Yeah, he's like 5 something. Yeah.
He's way down there, but the frame itself is 6'4", 300 pounds. There's a lot to build from there, and he's a track athlete. So that's another thing too. Texas and a lot of schools around the country love to recruit track athletes or basketball players that are big guys, because they know what they're doing footwork wise, and it just helps them athletically. Also an SMU commit. So again, another, I think, feather in the cap there. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know how far away we are in this race with all 3 of these guys. Landon Barnes has not committed anywhere yet. The other 2 have. And that's the thing too, because there's multiple ways to look at this. There are kids, when they get recruited by schools like SMU, TCU, they're very loyal to those schools because, hey, you're the first one to recognize me. You're the first one to give me an offer. I'm going to commit there. Then there are other guys like, well, you're the best offer I've had for right now, so I'll take the commitment, but I'm going to look around elsewhere. Is that what Texas is looking like right now? Or, I mean, is that the position Texas is in right now? I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. 'Cause there are guys that I think Texas doesn't offer until they see him in camp, right? Or they see him on campus working out, and Texas is in a position to be able to do that. For a long time, Texas was really late offering. That was a Tom Herman thing, right? Where Texas was getting on kids super late, and it was frustrating for a lot of fans who follow recruiting, including me. There is an opportunity here, and if it's going to come down, SMU is an up and coming program. They're in a Power Five conference now, so like they're starting to play with the big boys a little bit, right? And I don't think they'll ever be, and this is not a shot at SMU. This is just how like economics and size work, right? They're not going to be on the level of Texas and the SEC right now. So like if it's an NIL issue, I feel like Texas will win these recruitments. If it's a fit issue, I'm curious to see it. But again, I'm a believer that in spite of NIL, in spite of all of the modernity of college football, it's still about relationships and relationship management. So does Texas have the relationships with these kids to get them to even listen to the pitches, right? Is it going to be the way that they get them there? So, I like how you talked about diversifying the skill set at wide receiver, because like I said, Miles is not a typical cat that Steve Sarkisian brings in, but he's that guy who can catch a ball at the back of the end zone and high pointed. He's a guy who can, really be able to create something different in the offense, be a big target, kind of take the top off the defense even a little bit. He's faster than he probably should be at 6'3", 205. And Duncanville is really, Texas situation in Dallas is really weird, right?
Yeah.
For years they couldn't get their foot in the door anywhere in Dallas. Chris Gilbert comes in, reopens those doors for them, and so there's always kind of a little bit of hesitancy or a little bit of like just like slow to the gun on these Dallas kids, and so I'm curious to see how that shapes out. But he's a defender from Duncanville. Let's get him on campus.
Yeah, I mean, the last one that we got off the edge was pretty good, I would say. So,
Yeah,
yeah, can we get this one as well? But yeah, if I had to choose, like, off of what I would want out of these three, like ranking them how I'd want, I would go Landon Barnes, Alger Miles, and then Keith Doty, which basically is just the recruiting ranking. So I guess I'm copying off of that. But I do like Miles a lot.
Yeah, I think and Doty is one that I'm curious to see how he develops. He's a thrower, so he's got really good feet in high school. So again, that's something that 6'3", he's a little on the shorter end for a D tackle, but he's already at 300. So it's going to be curious to see how he develops.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that. Guys, can you please do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe down below? And then also, guys, you know about the Amazon link. Please use it. And I'm actually going to give you a message from Mark Rogers himself talking about the Amazon link. Remember, it does not change the buying experience whatsoever. So we really appreciate when you guys use that.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
We really appreciate you when you guys do that. Also, just came out about a week ago, I believe. We have the Voice of College Football website. Go and check that out. We have people writing articles now right there. You can check out breaking news as well. So really, really appreciate when you guys go and check that out. And it helps us grow. Again, continue to help us grow. Get on in at the ground floor and help us grow this on YouTube, on the website, and also on Instagram as well. Like we've said, just check out the Voice of College Football on Instagram. I have dropped the links in the comment section. We really appreciate you guys checking that out. Now, let's talk about this, Gerald. Position groups. Is Texas going to be better at quarterback? Is Texas going to be better at wide receiver this year than last year? Let's talk about that. And let's start out, obviously, with quarterback, and I'll let you start off with this one first.
This one I feel weird talking about, right? Because I am not one of these people that's crapping on Quinn Ewers and his performance at Texas. If you've been around here long enough, you've heard me say, like, we need some perspective on Quinn Ewers, right? We need to talk about, like, Quinn Ewers is the most successful quarterback at Texas since Colt McCoy. But with that being said, I think the quarterback position is going to be better, right? Because of the dynamic playmaking that Arch Manning brings as a runner, right? And Sark is never going to be, he said it before, and we've echoed it. Like, he's not going to be a run your quarterback 10 or 15 times a game kind of guy, because that's a quick way to get a guy hurt. But you have to respect Arch's legs, his ability to stretch the field with his feet, to reset the pocket, to move on a rollout. Again, I don't expect Sark to be a quarterback run guy. I don't think if Arch is running a ton next year, that's probably a bad thing for Texas. It means that the offensive line is struggling, or Sark is struggling to find a spark in the offense. But I do think Arch's ability with his legs, I think he might be probably more accurate on the deep balls than we've seen from Quinn Ewers. So I think, again, this is not a knock at Quinn Ewers, because I am somebody who loves and respects what Quinn Ewers did at Texas, but I think the quarterback position will be better next year.
No, I agree with that. Anyone that was saying, hey, last year Arch should have played, he shouldn't have. You saw they kind of neutered the offense, honestly, when he came into the game. Like, we had to scrap like 20-25% of the playbook because he didn't understand that, and that's perfectly fine. I think he's going to get almost all the way there this year. I think he's going to be pretty close. And I agree, the deep ball is going to be much better. Quinn Ewers either overthrew the deep ball or underthrew the deep ball. He never really had it down to where he needed it to be, but he was great, between 15, 25 yards. He was fantastic in the intermediate game. That's something I could see Quinn Ewers being better than Arch Manning, because honestly, he was one of the best college football players at the quarterback position at that. Now, the check down game, I think as long as Arch takes the check downs, he'll be fine. That might be the issue, as we saw in a couple games, is it's there, but I don't really want it. I want the deep shot. His check down was a 50-50 deep shot, and that's not sustainable. You will not win a national championship doing that. So I definitely think deep ball wise, we're going to be better. Intermediate, I think maybe the same. I honestly think Quinn will be a little bit better there, and then check down, I think will be about the same. So overall, I do expect Arch to be better. And then, like you said, the athleticism. I think Arch is an athlete, obviously, as we saw. I think we're going to use him a little bit in the red zone, not a lot. I don't think we're going to run him every time in the red zone, but on an important red zone trip, I think we're going to use him. And I think Sark has told Arch, hey, use your athleticism, but don't abuse the athleticism, because then that's how you get hurt. So I do agree. I think we will be better at the quarterback position. I know we just added a quarterback, but I'm going to be honest, that guy's going to be third or fourth string. I'm not going to really waste too much air and time on that, because, no offense to him, I don't even know why he transferred. I think he's going to end up being probably the third string this year, and then might transfer or stay around, I guess, be the fourth string next year.
I mean, if you got an opportunity to come to Texas, and he probably got a nice little, NIL check, he probably is going to come and get a free MBA from McCombs, right? That's not really a lose in that, right? Come hang out in one of the best cities in the country, get a little NIL check, get a free MBA from McCombs. Like, I can't blame the kid, right? Just come hang out, have a couple cool years in Austin, and then go, be an investment banker or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very true. Let's talk about running back now. So we lose Jaden Blue. He was our second best. I think he was our second best running back last year. Obviously, Trey Wisner returning, CJ Baxter returning from injury, Jarrett Gibson, Christian Clark, Ricky Stewart, those guys, James Simon. Do you think we will be better at the running back position this year?
There's a big asterisk here, because, like, how could it be worse than it was last year, right? Because our pets' heads were falling off, right? There are multiple injuries week after week. So CJ Baxter coming back healthy, I think, raises the ceiling of that room significantly. I think, you've got a depth in that room. I think Texas, is missing the second pitch in that room. I think all of those guys run pretty similarly. And so I think Texas is not going to have that home run hitter consistently at the running back position like they did have. And Jaden Blue, to his credit, he was the fastest running back, one of the fastest players on the team. But he always seemed to be one step away from breaking it. So Texas didn't really seem to have that home run hitter at running back regardless. Outside of that one play, I think in the playoffs. So ultimately, I think the running back room can't be worse than last year, because the guys, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, should be healthy. And the best ability for a player is availability. And so getting these guys back healthy means that it's going to be better this year.
I think it's this simple. If CJ Baxter is 85% of what he was his freshman year, and I think we're better. If he's not, I think we're going to be about the same or worse. I like Trey Wisner. I know I've seen some comments on here saying we're too tough, or I'm too tough on Trey Wisner. I like him. I think he's a good football player. What I'm saying, and what I tell you guys is the truth about winning national championships. I don't think Trey Wisner can be your number one running back on a national championship team. And then people ask, well, why? I'll tell you why. Look at the last 10 to 12 national championship teams. The worst running back on the national championship team, in my opinion, has been Wayne Gallman on Clemson. I think, and Wayne Gallman got drafted in like the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL draft. Trey Wisner will not be drafted in the 3rd or 4th round in the NFL draft. I don't like saying that, but it's just not going to happen. I think he's a good player, and I do think he will play in the NFL. I'm very confident in saying that. But you have to have more talent there at the running back position. He was going to be the 3rd running back last year for a reason, guys. There was a reason behind that. So I do think it's going to either be the same or slightly better, but I don't think it's going to be much better because I don't expect CJ Baxter to come in right away after that knee injury and just like light things on fire and be his totally normal self.
I mean, and this is one of those things where like multiple things can be true at the same time, right? Like I love and respect Trey Wisner for how he's conducted himself at Texas. He was almost a guy that didn't end up in that recruiting class, right? Because of just how he played. He got benched in high school for a guy who he had to move to wide receiver because somebody else came in and was a better running back than him, right? So like Trey Wisner should not have done the things that he did last year. He was a 1,000-yard rusher. He was great for Texas. He's been all about his business. He's been all about the team. And like those are the guys that set your culture and create a championship winning culture, right? But also Trey Wisner was basically number 500 in the country coming out of high school. So like that was the expectation for him. Trey Wisner has produced above and beyond what we thought he could do as a 3-star kid coming in, right? But I think Texas needs more from the running back position, especially I think the biggest differentiator for me is the ability to bang it out in the red zone, right? I think CJ Baxter brings some of that. Jarrett Gibson brings some of that. Christian Clark brings some of that. Trey Wisner's just not that big of a guy. He's not that thick of a guy. He's not that powerful of a runner that these other guys bring to the table. And so again, this is not me crapping on Trey Wisner because I'm a huge Trey Wisner fan. I hyped him up as much as I could, as much as I can. Listen to some of the old podcasts I did on the other platform, right? Trey Wisner is a guy who I will forever appreciate and should never have to buy a drink in the city of Austin again, period. End of sentence. He was incredible for Texas last year. But Texas has to be better at running back if they want to be competitive, right? Texas's inability to get the ball, the running game going was a limiting factor. Go look at the splits in wins and losses from last year statistically. Their worst running games were their worst games. Right. So Texas has to be better at running back. And some of that falls on the offensive line. Don't hear me saying that. Don't miss that I'm saying that, right? Texas, some of that falls on the offensive line, but ultimately Texas needs more out of the running game.
100%. So I'm going to go slightly better. I'm not going to say a lot better. What do you think?
I think it all, my notes say better if CJ Baxter's healthy. Right?
Okay.
If CJ Baxter's healthy, they'll be better.
Yeah, we're on the same page then. Wide receiver. So you lose Bond, you lose Golden, you lose Cook. I threw him in there because obviously some people had a lot of expectations for him. You lose Silas Bolden as well. DeAndre Moore had an injury in the spring. Ryan Wingo had an injury in the spring. How do you see this wide receiver room next year compared to last year?
I think by virtue of just like where it's at right now, I think it's going to be worse, right? Like when we look at where we're at today versus where we were 12 months ago, like I just don't feel as good about the position as I did last year. And I think this is probably the group on the team that has the widest variance between floor and ceiling, right?
Yeah.
I think the ceiling of this group is astronomical. The level of talent in this room is through the stinking roof. You've got stars on stars on stars. You've got experienced guys transferring in. You've got a lot of disparate skill sets. Like there's a lot of good that could come from this room. But the floor, I don't know what the floor is, and it could be pretty low, right? It could be a group that has a very low floor. And so last year, you had Matthew Golden, you even had Isaiah Bond early in the season, right? Before he got injured. It's like there's just no way I think this group can be. I don't want to say there's no way. As it stands right now, I feel less confident about this room than I did a year ago.
Yeah, so this one's kind of similar to the running back room for me. If Ryan Wingo is healthy and this hamstring doesn't linger, I think he's going to be the best wide receiver to step on Texas's campus since Roy Williams, and I stand by that.
Okay.
But there's only one of him. So I think if I'm ranking based off last year, if Ryan Wingo hits 90% of his peak this year, then it's Matthew Golden for me. And then who is number 3? Like last year, we had Isaiah Bond when he was healthy would be better than anyone right now in that wide receiver room. So I think it's going to be slightly worse. I don't think it's going to be a lot worse. I think it's going to be slightly worse. I would agree. I think it's going to be slightly the worse. But overall, I still think it's a really good room. Like, let's be honest here. This would be the best wide receiver room in Tom Herman or Charlie Strong era by a lot. It wouldn't even be close.
Without a doubt. And that's what I've got. Like, it's, I want to call it a push, really. Like, I don't have a firm read on it, but I think just based on, like, I just don't know who the guys are going to be, right? There are so many question marks. We knew last year that it was going to be Isaiah Bond. It turned out to be Matthew Golden. Doesn't matter, right? Texas had a guy, surefire guy 2 years ago, right? Texas had Xavier Worthy, then Adonai Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell. It's like, we knew going into the year who the guy was going to be. We don't know who the guy's going to be this year. And so that, to me, makes it worse.
I think we're on the same page. Now, this will be interesting. Tight end. And I would have said way, way worse if we didn't land Jack Endries. I would have said that. But I think this room has a higher upside with him. I really believe that. I think he's one of the 3 best tight ends in college football. I think he's going to be probably a second-round draft pick whenever he decides to come out. So I think this room's going to be better. I do. I think there's also more like higher tier athleticism in this room. Like, if Nick Townsend can pick up the playbook quickly, he's the best tight end like athlete we've had here in a very, very long time. He's a better athlete than Jatavian Sanders. He's a better athlete than Gunnar Helm. That guy's a freak at the tight end position. I think Jordan Washington is a really good athlete at the tight end position. And I think Spencer Shannon can play a decent role in this offense. So I like the upside of this room, and that's why I do think it's going to be better than last year's tight end room, especially since we got literally nothing from Amari Niblack. I expected decent things from him, like 300 or 400 yards receiving. He couldn't even give me that. So I think this year's tight end room will be better.
Yeah, I think based on sheer depth, I definitely think this year's tight end room is going to be better. I mean, you mentioned some of the names. I think, Endries is going to be your top guy, but then you've got Jordan Washington, who got some run last year. Right? Spencer Shannon is a nightmare, like, matchup for anybody, right? Just huge athletic guy. And I think all these guys are willing blockers. So I think when you've got a room full of guys that are both threats in the passing game and willing blockers, you really create something. And Texas didn't have that last year past Gunnar Helm. And so I think, do I think that, Jack Endries will match what Gunnar Helm did? I feel like it'd be an unfair expectation to put on him. I think he could. I think he's talented enough to do it. But I think, being the focal point of the offense like Gunnar Helm was in so many ways is an unfair expectation to put on somebody. That being said, I think Texas will have more contributors in the tight end room. Texas will be able to do some multiple tight end personnel. They'll be able to flex somebody out. They'll be able to do some more interesting schematic things that Steve Sarkisian likes to do because they'll have more guys at tight end that can do those things.
So you would go slightly better as well?
I will go slightly better.
Okay, so we're on the same page. I think the offense as a whole, once we'll hit offensive line and then we'll talk about that, but I think it will be slightly better as a whole overall as well. Let's go to the offensive line. I mean, we lose 4 out of 5 starters. So I do think later in the year, its peak will be higher than last year's offensive line peak. I will say that, but it's going to take a little bit of time to get up to speed because you have 4 new starters there, and Devon Campbell has yet to live up to expectations. So he's got to be able to do that. I trust in Trevor Gooseby. I trust in Devon Campbell for the most part. I think Cole Hudson's going to be a pretty good center. I actually think he's going to be better in certain areas than Jake Majors. Not setting protections and stuff like that, which is very important, but just straight up when the ball snap, I think he can be a better center than Jake Majors. Same thing at guard. I think Umlu Zulu will be better than Hayden Connor overall as a guard. My only question mark is right tackle because Brandon Baker honestly hasn't been like, yep, he's our right tackle. There's still a competition going there, which is a little concerning.
Yeah, and I think, my initial thought is like Texas will be worse by virtue of Kelvin Banks not being there, right? Like you have an offensive line unit that doesn't have Kelvin Banks. And so there's that like looming in the background. So I think removing Kelvin Banks from any unit just means they're going to be worse than they were a year ago, but it's not going to be a bad unit. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Matthew, where, offensive line, more than I think any unit on the field, needs time to gel, right? Needs time to learn because it's all about communicating with the guy next to you and positioning your body. Where do my feet need to go so they don't trip over them as they pull, right? Where do my hands go on a chip block versus his hands? So I think this Texas unit has a ton of talent, but I think and this is going to be the big test. Texas going into Ohio State week 1, this offensive line is going to have to grow up really, really fast. They're going to have to do a lot of great work because Ohio State's got a really solid defensive front. And so, you got a young quarterback back there. But back to the point, I think they're going to be worse, but not bad, right? And they're not going to be a bad unit. It's going to take up a little bit of time, but worse simply by the virtue of like Kelvin Banks is gone. 80% of your starts are gone, right? Like that's just, it's hard to replace that.
So this is the only thing that I think position group we even disagree on a little bit, because I think they're going to be slightly better. You think they're going to be slightly worse. And what about the offense as a whole? Do you think it's going to be a lot better, a little bit better, same? What do you think?
I think the offense will be slightly better because I feel like it'll be more dynamic. I feel like the offense will be more dynamic. I feel like the offense will hit some bigger chunk plays than Texas did this past year. I think it's going to be a bit more what we expected to see from Steve Sarkisian when he came in, seeing some big chunk plays, seeing some big explosive plays. That's been the big, I think, missing factor for the Texas offense over the last couple of years. And I think that will, again, if the offensive line is decent, if Arch Manning is who we think he is, right? If these wide receivers, even if it's, in a kind of group, a wide receiver by committee situation, I think overall the offense will be more explosive and it'll be better than it was a year ago.
I completely agree. I think it's going to be slightly better. I think we were basically like a top 20 offense last year. I'm thinking more of top 12, top 13 type offense this year. I think it's going to be slightly better. That does it for the offensive side of the ball, but let's hit on the defensive side of the ball now. So we'll start out the defensive line, and we lost a bunch of people here. So Alfred Collins gone, Vernon Broughton gone, Bill Norton gone, Tia Sevilla gone, Jermaine Lole gone, Baron Sorrell gone. I mean, there's so many damn people that we missed off this, especially on the interior. I mean, you really only lose Baron Sorrell off the edge. You lose a bunch of guys on the interior. So what do you think about this defensive line as a whole?
Yeah, I think you have to look at it almost as two separate units. I think the edges will be the same, if not better than a year ago. And I think the interior will probably be worse than it was a year ago. But again, this is a group that I think, along with the wide receiver room, has a really big delta between the floor and the ceiling, right? Because there is a ton of untested, unproven talent in there, right? There's some former high 4-star guys in there, some former top 100, top 50 kind of guys in that defensive line group, especially the defensive tackle group, right? It's there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of experience on the lower end of the talent spectrum there. So I think this group has the opportunity to be really good for Texas, but I just don't know who it's going to be. We're still trying to figure out who's going to be your number one defensive tackle, who's going to be your nose, who's going to be your 3. We don't know that. We have zero clue. None of these guys have proven anything in Austin. So I think on the edges, I think Texas will be better by virtue of you've got most of the same guys back and they'll be a year better. But I do think on the interior, they're not going to be as good as they were a year ago.
I completely agree. I think this is one of the best edge groups in the whole country. I think it's top 5 for sure. They're really, really good. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback. I think we have the best edge player in the country with Colin Simmons. But yeah, the interior, I just think is going to take a drop off. Last year, again, everyone said this is going to take a big drop off because you went from Sweat and Murphy to Collins and Broughton. But it didn't, because those guys had played before and they got better in the offseason. I've never seen any of these guys really play for Texas. I haven't. I've seen Alex January play a little bit. That's it. So I do expect a bigger drop off from the year prior. So I think overall, I think this defensive line is going to be about the same. I'm just going to say neutral. I don't think it's going to be a lot better, a little bit better. I think it's literally going to be about the same on the defensive line as a whole.
Yeah, I think if you look at it, I think the edges will be better, but the tackles will be worse. So it kind of balances itself out there. It's a very weird group to try to judge.
Yeah, 100%. The edges could be a top 5 in the country, and then the interior could be one of the worst, honestly. It could be. I'm not saying it will be, but it definitely could be. It would not shock me.
I would be more shocked by them being bad than them being good. I'll say it like that, though. I think I would be more shocked by the defensive tackles being really bad than them being one of the better groups, just because there's so many different bodies to choose from, and there's a lot of talent in there. And I think a lot of these guys know that this is probably their last chance to prove that they're who they were coming out of high school. So if they're not locked in and dialed in, that is a shame, because some of these guys could be in the league in a year or two if they lock in and they dial in and get their stuff together. It's they could be really good. It's a contract year for some of them.
No, I agree with the bodies part. By virtue of bodies, you have 7 to 8 guys that I think are legitimately going to get playing time. You're bound to find 1 to 2 pretty good players in there. So, or hopefully, I hope we don't go 0 for 8 on those guys, because that could derail the season. But overall, I think it's a neutral. You think it's going to be about a neutral as well?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Linebacker, I think it's going to be a lot better. You really only lose David Benda. I think Ty Anthony Smith is going to take a leap here. I think Anthony Hill's the best linebacker in the country. So I think this linebacker room is going to be very, very good.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Leon Leifau take snaps from David Benda as the year progressed. Anthony Hill is only going to be better. This is his last year in Austin, folks. So like, watch every snap with fear and reverence, like you would at church, right? Because like he's gone after this year. Like take in every moment. Leon Leifau is going to be better. He was already developing and becoming a really solid linebacker. Like you said, Ty Anthony Smith is going to be a guy who steps in and really adds to the rotation. Texas added a guy in the portal who I think is also going to be a contributor in the rotation as well. So, this group, not even just by virtue of experience, right? Because Texas has basically the same guys they had ending last year, and they're going to be a year better, right? Like they're just going to be better. And I think they're going to be significantly better than they were a year ago.
No, I agree. Hey, guess what? That will help the interior as well. So that definitely will help out the interior, the defensive line. I completely agree. I think this is probably the last time we had this type of linebacker play at Texas is when we had Malik Jefferson his last year here. I think he was that damn good that his last year here. So it's been over a decade now since we've had that type of play. So I do expect the linebackers to be very, very good and a lot better. I think honestly, out of every position group we've named, I think this takes the biggest leap.
I could see that. I think you're spot on there.
Next up, now this one I think is going to be worse. Cornerback. You lose the best cornerback in the country. You don't really have anyone to replace him. You also have Malik Muhammad coming off his worst year of the two that he has been on Texas. So he's got to slide over now and take over for Jahdae Barron. Can he just get back to his freshman level of play? How does the other cornerback position look, whether that's Kobe Black or Jalen Gilbo? And then nickelback is the one position I do think we're going to be better at because I think Jelani McDonald ends up probably winning that, if not for Wardell Mack or Grayson Littleton. I think any one of those guys will play better than Jalen Gilbo did last year. I think Jalen Gilbo, honestly, was the biggest disappointment in the secondary last year for Texas at the nickelback position. So I do think that's the one position group we do get better at the cornerback position. But both outside, I expect to be worse. I just do.
Yeah, I mean, you said it right off front. It's the same reason why I feel like the offensive line is going to be worse. You lose one of, if not the best defensive backs in the country, and you're going to be worse by virtue, right? You remove the Thorpe Award winner from that unit, they're going to be worse. Now, again, I think there's a lot of talent in this group. You mentioned Manny Muhammad. I think is a guy who probably wants to step up. This could be a contract year for him, right? Jelani McDonald, this could be a contract year for him. Jalen Gilbo has got to prove that he's an NFL guy or he's not going to make it, right? Contract year for him. So I put a high value on it. It's silly to call it a contract year, but it is, right? For a guy who's going into his third year, a guy who's going into his fourth year, right? This is the year or years where you have to prove that you're worth an NFL draft pick. And so, I think there's these guys, hopefully they're locked in, hopefully they're dialed in, but I just don't think by virtue of, again, you mentioned you lose the Thorpe Award winner, not walking through that door next year. So that in and of itself is a loss and things are going to get worse. But I think there's a lot of guys with a lot of talent who have big NFL dreams that if they don't put it together this year, that's probably not going to come together. So I think that's something that hopefully will spur and spark them to kind of get their act together and get things going.
Yeah, and this room has the talent. Like, yeah, you're loaded at cornerback, like talent-wise, but I just don't think we have the experience early on to, deal with that. Especially Ohio State, like their wide receivers week one with that secondary could be an issue if we can't get to the quarterback. I could definitely see that happening. So I do think it's worse. I think honestly, this is probably we just went from the biggest climb for a room. I think this is the biggest drop-off for a room is the quarterback room.
I completely agree with that. I think that this room is going to be, and again, this is why we need the edges and the linebackers to be really good.
100%. Next up, we'll go to safety. You lose Andrew Makuba, who was absolutely phenomenal for this team. But I think overall, this is going to be either a slight positive or basically neutral from last year because you're going to get Derek Williams back. I think Xavier Filsaime is going to play a lot more this year and play well. You bring back Michael Taft. They have a lot of good players in this room. So I think overall, we're even at worst with this room, in my opinion, going into next year.
Yeah, I think this room, much like some of the other I've mentioned, kind of honestly like the running back room with CJ Baxter, right? I think if this group is going to be as good as it is last year, I think it depends on Derek Williams' health, right? Is he able to come back? Is he going to be as effective? Is he going to be who he was, his freshman year? Because he was a really good safety, right? So like, replacing Makuba is big shoes to fill, right? 70 tackles, 5 interceptions, tone setter on defense, right? So like Makuba's gone, Taffy's back, and he's going to really create the culture. But from a like on the field production standpoint, like Makuba was that dude last year. And so, does Derek Williams come in and meet that? Or is it Xavier Fieldsmeyer? Is it Jordan Johnson-Rubel? Like, who is the guy who's going to come and step in to Andrew Makuba's outsized, impact that he had on the defense in 1 year? I don't know if they can do that. I think they have the talent, they have the ability, but again, it's untested. We have not seen them in the big seat, in the big chair, kind of with all of the weight on them of doing it. So with that being said, I think the group will probably be worse, but again, depending on Derek Williams' ability to be healthy and to play and contribute.
That's fair. I mean, yeah, I could definitely see that, and I completely agree. Like, Derek Williams is a really, really good football player. He was playing really well last year before he got hurt. So I think he can do almost everything Andrew Makuba did and even more if he's healthy. But again, he may not be healthy right away. But I will say he's been practicing, and from all reports, looks pretty healthy. So that's really good. So overall, I think we both have wide receiver being a little bit worse. We have cornerback being worse. And then you have safety being worse. But overall, do you think this team is better next year at every position group?
Oh man, it's so hard. Like, this was a team that went to the college football like semifinals, right? So it's hard for me to say they're better because like that would mean that this is a national championship playing team. And I just like the expectations are really high for this team right now. It's hard for me to say better, even though like I went position by position and said that a lot of them will be better. But ultimately, like I still can't say this is going to be a better team next year. Just we have to see it, right? We'll know pretty early on whether or not they'll be a better team next year. I think position by position, but we've seen it at Texas before where the sum of the parts is not as great as what they put on the field, right? So like there's that like in the back of my head that I just can't quite get over.
No, I agree. I think they're going to be about the same, honestly, talent-wise. They might be a little bit more athletic overall. And then I do think they'll just probably end up losing one more game because the schedule switch and you're going to play much harder road games this year. That's how I feel. So
on the road at Florida. Yeah.
And Georgia and Ohio State. So that's what I like. Don't even look at the record. Just look at the product on the field. And last year, let's be honest here, Texas allowed teams to stay in games. Like, they should have killed a lot more teams on that schedule. I do think you'll see that this year because of the big playability on offense and getting after the quarterback. I think they're going to blow some teams out pretty easily this year. That honestly, last year they didn't.
I can see that. Vandy, Arkansas, those kind of games where Texas, it should not have been a rock fight, and it was. I'm with you there.
That does it for the position group breakdown. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. It really helps out. This has been the 51st edition of Texas Longhorns Live. We'll have 52 next week, so please stay tuned for that, 8 p.m. Eastern time. As always, you can check me out right there on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Right there is my handle, and that's Gerald's handle as well on Twitter, Blue Sky, as well as his podcast, which you can check out on Spotify, Apple, or Amazon, wherever it may be. You can also check out the Voice of College Football on Spotify, Apple, or Amazon. If you don't want to watch us and you want to listen to us, please do that. Thank you guys for being here, and as always, hook 'em.
Hook 'em.